Have you ever experienced that gut-wrenching moment when the woman who once looked at you with adoring eyes suddenly became cold and distant? The moment when her warm smile turned into indifference, her passionate texts became sparse, and her desire to be with you vanished into thin air? You're not imagining it. That shift is real, and it's happened to countless men throughout history. Today, you're about to discover the hidden archetypal forces that Carl Jung uncovered. Forces that silently drive women's deepest emotional behaviors after you've fallen for them. This knowledge has been buried in academic psychology for decades, but understanding it will finally bring you the clarity you've been desperately searching for. The pain you're experiencing isn't just emotional, it's existential. That feeling of betrayal when she changed after you opened your heart isn't just disappointment, it's a profound confusion that makes you question your entire reality. Was anything she said or did real? Did I imagine the connection? Why would she pull away right when I showed her how much I cared? These questions haunt you at night, creating a wound that doesn't heal because you lack the framework to understand what actually happened. The solution lies not in modern dating advice or superficial psychology, but in the depths of the collective unconscious that Jung mapped over a lifetime of studying the human psyche. By understanding the feminine archetypes and the shadow aspects that emerge in relationships, you'll finally see the pattern that's been playing out repeatedly in your life. You'll discover why she seems to change after you fall for her, and more importantly, how to navigate this archetypal dance without losing yourself in the process. Before we dive into the specific archetypes that influence female behavior in relationships, you need to understand the fundamental concepts Jung discovered about the human psyche. Jung believed that beneath our conscious awareness lies not only our personal unconscious, but a deeper layer he called the collective unconscious, a reservoir of experiences shared by all humanity across time and cultures. Within this collective unconscious reside archetypes, universal patterns or models of people, behaviors or personalities. These archetypes are not learned, they are innate. They exist within every human being, regardless of culture, race, or gender. However, they express themselves differently in men and women, creating distinctive patterns in relationships. For men, one of the most powerful archetypes is the anima, the feminine aspect within the male psyche. This is your inner image of the ideal woman, shaped by your relationship with your mother and other significant female figures in your early life. When you meet a woman who seems to match this inner image, you experience that magical feeling of falling in love. You project your anima onto her, seeing her not as she truly is, but as the embodiment of your inner feminine ideal. This is where the trouble begins. When you project your anima onto a woman, you're not seeing the real person. You're seeing a goddess, a muse, a perfect being who seems to understand you completely. And in the early stages of attraction, she may unconsciously step into this role, reflecting back to you the very qualities you've projected onto her. This creates that intoxicating sense of connection, that feeling that you finally found the one. But here's what Jung discovered that most men never realize. Women have their own complex internal archetypes, including the animus, their masculine counterpart. And when a man completely surrenders to his anima projection, something profound shifts in the woman's psyche. Let me explain this with an everyday example. Remember when you first met her, you maintained your independence, your sense of purpose. You had your own life, your own goals. You weren't desperately seeking her approval. During this phase, her archetypal feminine energy was naturally drawn to your centered masculine energy. The tension between your worlds created attraction, but then, as you fell deeper for her, you began to prioritize her above everything else. You started canceling plans with friends to be with her. You began texting back immediately whenever she messaged. You revealed all your vulnerabilities, all your insecurities. In Jungian terms, you surrendered completely to your anima projection, losing your own center in the process. And that's precisely when she changed. What you're experiencing isn't a change in her feelings, it's the emergence of her shadow. In Jungian psychology, the shadow contains all the aspects of ourselves that we repress or deny. The feminine shadow includes qualities like emotional coldness, manipulation, and detachment, qualities that emerge when the archetypal balance in a relationship is disturbed. When you surrendered your center to worship at the altar of your anima projection, her unconscious detected this imbalance. Her shadow emerged not out of malice, but as an unconscious response to the collapse of archetypal tension that initially created the attraction. This manifests in various ways depending on which feminine archetype is dominant in her psyche. Jung and his followers identified several key feminine archetypes, each with its own light and shadow aspects. The mother archetype in its positive form is nurturing, protective, and supportive. But when a man becomes too dependent, too childlike in his need for approval, the shadow mother emerges, controlling, suffocating, or conversely, coldly rejecting. You might have experienced this when she initially cared for you during difficult times, but then became irritated by your needs, saying things like, "I'm not your mother," or "I can't be responsible for your happiness." This isn't a contradiction in her character. It's the shadow mother responding to your unconscious request to be mothered. The maiden archetype represents youthful femininity, spontaneity, and openness to experience. In its light aspect, she's playful, curious, and full of wonder. But when a man becomes too possessive or too insecure, the shadow maiden emerges, flighty, unreliable, prone to seeking attention elsewhere. You've seen this when she once loved your spontaneous dates and adventures, but later claimed to feel trapped or suffocated by the very relationship she once desired. Again, this isn't her being inconsistent. It's her shadow maiden responding to the threat to her essential freedom. The queen archetype embodies feminine power, leadership, and sovereignty. In its light aspect, she's confident, supportive of your ambitions, and a true partner. But when a man becomes weak-willed or loses his purpose, the shadow queen emerges, contemptuous, domineering, or completely withdrawing her emotional investment. This manifests when she once admired your ambition and drive, but later seemed to lose respect for you, making cutting remarks about your lack of direction or ambition. The shadow queen cannot respect a man who has lost respect for himself. The lover archetype represents passion, sensuality, and deep emotional connection. In its light aspect, she's passionate, intimate, and fully present. But when a man becomes needy or uses sex to seek validation, the shadow lover emerges, cold, withholding, or using sexuality as a form of power. You felt this when your once passionate relationship gradually cooled, with her finding excuses to avoid intimacy or treating it as a chore rather than a joy. The shadow lover cannot desire a man who desires from a place of emptiness rather than fullness. These archetypal patterns explain why she seems to change after you fall for her. It's not that her feelings weren't real, it's that your complete surrender to the anima projection triggered her shadow aspects. The woman who once seemed perfect didn't disappear. She was never fully there. She was partially your projection, and when that projection became too intense, her authentic self, including her shadow, emerged to restore balance. Now we come to the most profound revelation about female psychology that Jung uncovered, one that will forever change how you understand women's behavior in relationships. This revelation centers around what I call the Persephone principle, based on the Greek myth of the maiden who was taken to the underworld and emerged as a queen. In every woman's psyche lives the archetype of Persephone, the maiden who transforms through descent into darkness. This archetype carries a profound truth. The feminine psyche requires a journey into the shadow in order to achieve wholeness. And here's the shocking part. When you fall completely for a woman, surrendering your center to her, you unconsciously trigger her Persephone journey. Think about it. In the early stages of your relationship, she showed you her light aspects, her nurturing, her passion, her playfulness, her strength. You fell in love with these qualities, projecting your anima onto her and seeing her as perfect. But perfection is not wholeness. True wholeness requires the integration of both light and shadow. When you surrender completely to your anima projection, placing her on a pedestal and losing yourself in the process, you create an archetypal imbalance. The feminine psyche instinctively knows that this imbalance prevents true intimacy, because true intimacy can only exist between whole individuals, not between a worshiper and a goddess. So her Persephone nature activates. She begins her descent into her own shadow, withdrawing the very qualities you've idealized. and instead showing you the aspects of herself that she usually keeps hidden. Her coldness, her judgment, her detachment, her cruelty. This isn't done consciously or maliciously. It's an archetypal process as old as humanity itself. The Persephone in her is saying, if you want to truly know me, you must know all of me, not just the parts that fulfill your fantasy. Here's how this profoundly impacts your emotional life. The very qualities that drew you to her, her warmth, her openness, her passion, seem to disappear precisely when you've invested most deeply in the relationship. The woman who once made you feel like the most important person in her world now makes you feel insignificant or burdensome. The emotional connection that seemed unbreakable now feels distant or non-existent. This creates a devastating wound, not just to your heart but to your sense of reality. You begin to question everything: your worth, your perception, even your sanity. Did I imagine that connection? Why would she change so dramatically? What did I do wrong? But here's the truth that will set you free. She didn't change. What changed was the archetypal dynamic between you. When you surrendered your center to worship the goddess you projected onto her, you unwittingly invited her shadow to emerge. And emerge it did, not to hurt you, but to restore balance and create the possibility for true intimacy. True intimacy isn't possible between a worshiper and a goddess. It's only possible between two whole human beings who see and accept each other completely, light and shadow alike. By withdrawing her light aspects and showing you her shadow, she's unconsciously inviting you to a deeper level of relationship, one based not on fantasy, but on the full reality of who you both are. This is why the most painful moments in relationships often precede the most profound growth. When her shadow emerges after you've fallen for her, you're being invited to see beyond your anima projection to the real, complex woman before you. A woman who contains both light and darkness, just as you do. The men who never understand this archetypal dance are doomed to repeat it in relationship after relationship, falling for the projection, being devastated when the shadow emerges, and then moving on to project the same anima onto another woman, creating the same imbalance and triggering the same response. But you now have the opportunity to break this cycle. By understanding the Persephone principle, you can navigate this archetypal dance with awareness rather than confusion. You can maintain your center even as you open your heart. You can see her shadow aspects not as betrayal but as an invitation to deeper intimacy. You can meet her wholeness with your own. Now that you've glimpsed the profound archetypal forces at work when she changes after you fall for her, how will you navigate your relationships differently? This isn't just academic knowledge. It's a key that can unlock a completely new experience of love and intimacy in your life. The first step is to recognize your own anima projections. When you feel that intoxicating sense of falling in love, pause and ask yourself, am I seeing the real woman before me? Or am I seeing my inner feminine ideal projected onto her? This awareness alone can prevent the complete surrender to projection that triggers the shadow response. The second step is to maintain your center even as you open your heart. Remember, the initial attraction was created by the tension between two separate worlds. When you lose yourself in her, you collapse that tension and extinguish the very spark that created the connection, continuing to honor your purpose, your friendships. Your personal growth isn't selfish. It's essential for keeping the relationship alive. The third step is to welcome the shadow when it emerges, both hers and yours. When she becomes cold, distant, or critical after you've fallen for her, recognize this not as rejection but as an opportunity. She's showing you parts of herself that she usually keeps hidden. By accepting these aspects with compassion rather than fear or anger, you create space for true intimacy to develop. Think about your past relationships. Can you see this pattern now? The idealization, the surrender, the emergence of the shadow, the confusion and pain. With this new understanding, how might those relationships have unfolded differently? What would you do differently now? This journey into the depths of Jungian psychology reveals a profound truth. The perfect woman, who seems to change after you fall for her, was never fully real. She was partly your projection, the woman who emerges after, with all her complexity, her contradictions, her light and shadow. is much more real. And it's only with this real woman that true love is possible. The choice is now yours. Will you continue to chase the perfect projection, only to be devastated when the shadow inevitably emerges? Or will you embrace the whole woman, with all her archetypal complexity, and create a relationship based on truth rather than fantasy? This understanding of Jung's insights into the feminine psyche offers you not just clarity about past pain, but a roadmap to future fulfillment. By recognizing the archetypal dance between masculine and feminine energies, you can navigate relationships with wisdom rather than confusion, creating connections that deepen rather than dissolve when shadows emerge. If this exploration of Jungian archetypes and the feminine shadow has resonated with your experiences, share your story in the comments below. How have you experienced the emergence of the shadow after falling deeply for someone? What insights has this given you about your own patterns in relationships? Like this video if these Jungian insights have shed light on your experiences, and subscribe to continue exploring the depths of human psychology. Check out our previous videos on masculine archetypes and the hero's journey to complete your understanding of the archetypal forces at work in relationships. Remember, the darkness that emerges after you fall for her isn't the end of love. It's an invitation to a love more real than anything you've experienced before. A love not between a worshiper and a goddess, but between two whole human beings who see and accept each other completely. That's the love worth fighting for.